Hey everybody, it's Greg, and it's another edition of Unbreakable the podcast. It is Tuesday, June the 10th, and I thought today we'd talk a little bit about Remember When, our segment that I started recently. We talk about the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, three of the greatest decades that I've lived through. My favorites, really. And so let's talk about let's reminisce a little bit. 60s. I want to talk about there was a guy in the 60s. Well, he's still going strong, but the 60s is when he made his bread and butter. Now, the 60s music, we know about the Beatles, of course, how endearing they are. They're still going strong, the Beatles are. I mean, there's four movies coming out in a couple years, uh, four movies for each Beatle, and it'll be like a biopic for each Beatle. That's going to be really cool. I can't wait for that. And of course, we had our British invasion, and we had our psychedelic era. Motown was going strong in the 60s, and it was just a great time for music. Well, there's one person that sometimes gets overlooked when we're talking about the 60s and beyond. And that guy, I've grown to appreciate him and his music over the years because he is a hell of a singer. We talk about the females, great female singers of our time, Whitney Houston, right? So many great female singers since I've been alive, you know. I mean, we're going all the way back. If you really want to talk about Dusty Springfield, what a singer she was. Olivia Newton-John, uh, Aretha Franklin, Tina Turner. Oh my God. So, but this guy stands out, and I won't keep you waiting any longer. His name is Tom Jones. Tom Jones, and I was never a fan when I was growing up in the 60s of Tom Jones, although I liked his music and I watched him on TV because he had a show called This Is Tom Jones in the 60s. And what I loved about that show, the more I Google it now and see clips, um, the duets he did, just great. I mean, Tom Jones is 85 years old and he's still going strong legally. He comes over here once in a while, does a few concerts, does a tour, goes back home, England, although he's from Wales, um, goes back to England, and he's on one of these shows over there. Like we have The Voice, American Idol. He's on one of those shows over in Britain as a judge. But he is still singing strong. He has always been a strong singer, baritone. And he could hit those high notes too, and those low notes too. But he's always a ladies' man. Dressed his shirt open, wide open, down to his navel. And ladies loved him. They would throw their panties at him at concerts and shows. And he was one of the first. I mean, Elvis, they did that to Elvis too. Come on. But Tom Jones was one of the first singers, male singers out there to really flaunt his sexiness, so to speak. I remember there was like a little running feud. I wouldn't call it feud, but sort of either back in the 60s, either were a Tom Jones guy or girl, more specifically, or an Engelbert Humperdinck. And that was because they each had TV shows, if you remember, and they each had a different crowd. Engelbert, I think, was the more mellow guy, sang more adult contemporary stuff, whereas Tom Jones sang more rock and roll and soul. And he got into country a little bit, like in the 80s, but he has always been a great blues and soul singer. And if you listen to some of his songs, some of his records, I mean, he can belt it out with the best of them. And the thing of Tom Jones is, 85 years old, he's still singing really, really strongly. Compare that to other people who are in their 80s. I mean, Paul McCartney, who I love, I love the Beatles. If you've been following me on this channel, uh, over 500 episodes, you know that I'm a big Beatles fan. I love Paul McCartney. But unfortunately, his singing isn't good anymore. And I think, he is 83 and there's only so much you could give. I mean, he started singing in Beatles when he was in his early 20s, 18, very young. And imagine all the time that he has spent singing, from touring and in the studio, concerts especially, and making records. And, nothing lasts forever. So I just saw him with Bruce Springsteen, over the weekend. They got together. Bruce was playing in Liverpool, Paul's hometown, where the Beatles are from. And second show of the run in Liverpool, he comes up and joins the boss, but Paul McCartney himself, so Paul. And they did a 2 songs, Can't Buy Me Love and Kansas City, hey, 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 hey. And I was straining, just like I'm straining with my voice, but I had more of a frog in my voice last couple of days. I think a lot of it, though, is his voice. He has sung so much of it. There's nothing left. I think a lot of it, too, is breathing. I saw Gordon Lightfoot in concert right before he died, actually. And he was past his prime, he was. I wish I had seen him sooner. Never had the opportunity. But I did see him a couple of years ago before he passed. And he could only sing like in whispers. And the reason for that was not his voice, but his lung capacity, the breathing. The singing comes from the diaphragm, from the lungs, and he just didn't have that. He just didn't have that lung, what you needed from your lungs and your diaphragm to push out the words, just couldn't do anything. And unfortunately, that's what's happening to Paul. But back to Tom Jones. Tom Jones, 85, and is still singing great. You know his songs from the 60s, right? What's New, Pussycat? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Delilah, give me Delilah. I just couldn't take anymore. It's not unusual to be in love with the green, green grass. And that's probably my favorite, along with Delilah. But he had a lot of great hits. And he's lasting, how singers are. Other than a super group like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, individual singers have their popularity, and they kind of peter off a little bit. You don't hear from them, and then all of a sudden they come back again. Every single, even Sinatra had his down times. Even Elvis had his down times. When Elvis was making movies in the 60s, instead of making records and going out and touring. Can you imagine seeing Elvis on tour in the early 60s when it was really good? But Tom Jones went through the same thing. After his TV show ended, he had a lull, and then he went into country music. And then he came back in the late 80s, where he he covered one of Prince's songs, Kiss. That was so funky. Woo, funky. And so he comes and goes. But, Tom Jones is still recording. He's 85 years old. He's still recording new music. He's just the type of guy you appreciate. The longer you live, he goes on and on, you appreciate his talent even more. Now, he wasn't a songwriter, like some of our singer-songwriters, Elton John, Billy Joel. But Tom Jones was a pure singer. He was a singer, as they say. as Johnny Mathis was back in the day. Uh, your singers would say Johnny Mathis was a singer's singer, which means that other singers really loved his voice and just wished they could have his voice. So, so when I think 60s and British invasion, you hear about all these bands coming over, quite bands, great. The Yardbirds and the Birds and Herbert's Hermits and Jerry and Pacemakers, Dave Clark Five, the Kinks, right? But along with that, you've got Tom Jones, and I think he's someone that we need to appreciate while he's still around. All right, so cheers. It is pink, but it is water. I doctored it up with a little water flavoring. Okay, 70s. Let's talk about something that I added in the 70s too. You know what I thought I would talk about? Two things. There's a lot that I loved about the 70s back in the day. You know, I loved it. And it's just hard sometimes picking out different topics and categories because there's just so much that you can talk about. But I came up with two things. The bicentennial, 1976. I was alive for it. Now, next year, we're going to be celebrating what's called Sasquatch Centennial or whatever, 250 years. And for you youngins out there who were around in 1976, maybe you were too young to remember it. Next year will be sort of like we celebrated in 76. I want to tell you about that. Everything was bicentennial theme, red, white, and blue, you know? And that was the year, since America was celebrating its birthday, we had all kinds of events in town. You know, baseball all-star game. We had all kinds of stuff going on in Philadelphia and around this region. It was just such a fun time to be alive, especially that weekend. 4th of July fell on Sunday, July 4th, 1976. But all that weekend was just special. You know, you turn on TV, you saw the tall ships sailing into New York Harbor. Like all the hundreds and hundreds of ships with their sails out. And it was majestic to see that. The Statue of Liberty all lit up, fireworks all around here. I got to tell you, you know, here where I live, we had a wagon train go through town. You guys who remember that, who may be watching me from locally, you remember we had a wagon train. It was almost like the real like Oregon Trail. Did you ever play that game on Nintendo or whatever? Yeah, that's what it was like. It was like this. Wait a minute, somebody's grilling out. I had my windows up in here, bedroom. Oh my god, I love it. Somebody's grilling out for lunch, either hot dogs or hamburgers or steak. Crimey, creaky. It smells good. I can't. Oh my god, I love this time of year. You know, I love it. Barbecues, cookouts. Summertime is on the line, and one of the glories of summertime is smelling that barbecue. Oh god, it's the best. But so was 1976. And that particular, the day before, July the 3rd, we had a wagon train come through my small town, Phoenix. And that wagon train left from Oregon, went crisscrossed all around the country, coming together with other wagon trains from the south, from the north, from the west, from the east. And they all came together, and the destination was Valley Forge Park, about 5 minutes away from where I live. So I remember on the day before the 4th, they rolled through town. It was absolutely tremendous to see real authentic wagon trains and the horses pulled on, and you'd have the people dressed up in colonial garb, Western garb, and it was just, it was absolutely great. And then on the 4th of July itself, President Ford, that was the president back then, he came to Valley Forge Park. There were 1 million people in the park. And he gave a speech on the 4th of July. And I'll never forget it. It's just something that stays with me forever. And that's how you guys are going to feel next year. And hopefully I'm still around. So we celebrate 250. Now, certainly I'm not going to be around for the tricentennial in 2076. Maybe some of you guys will. Maybe the young whippersnappers certainly will. But I'm not going to be. But I do have fond memories of the bicentennial. I'd say another 70s thing that I know. Family Feud. Remember Family Feud? It's still on now. It's on with Steve Harvey. And, it's still on. It's okay. But there was nothing like the real original Family Feud with Richard Dawson as the host. And I'll tell you what, that could never be that original day like today. Richard Dawson was kissing everybody on the lips and kissing. He demanded a kiss. Not from the guys, but from the ladies. It was just a fun show to watch, And you watch it now and you think, wow, we're talking 50 years ago, and it's just so, I don't know, times were much simpler back then. We had other game shows. Do you remember Let's Make a Deal? That's still on. But the original one was with Monty Hall. Monty Hall was a Canadian who came down, hosted Let's Make a Deal. That was his claim to fame, And there was all kind. The Price is Right is still going strong, right? With Bob Barker. And so many great game shows in the past. Tic-Tac-Toe, remember that? High Rollers, where the contestants had to roll these gigantic pair of dice, just like craps. And it's a lot of great fun, The Match Game. Do you remember the Match Game? Oh my God, that was one of my favorite games. You had Gene Rayburn, with that big long microphone that he would carry around. And you had the panelists, like some of them were like on every week, like Charles Nelson Riley, Brett Summers. Do you remember Brett Summers on that show? Nipsey with a Song. He would always start the show off with a little poem, and so many great characters back then. And a lot of them crossed over to Hollywood Squares. Remember Hollywood Squares? Paul Lynde would be in the middle, center of the square. It was like tic-tac-toe game. And Paul Lynde usually would be right in the middle, which was the important square. You want to get that middle square. In fact, there's a little tip. If you're playing a game, no matter what kind of game or sport, it's always important to control the middle of the board. Like, let's say you're playing chess or you're playing checkers. If you control the middle of the board, you have so many other options because you could go left or right, north or south on your board. It's the same way in baseball. They always said, if you're strong up the middle, you have a good team. And, the two championship teams that the Phillies won in 1980 and 2008, they were strong up the middle. In 1980, you had Bob Boone as catcher. Shortstop was Larry Boa. Second base was Manny Trio. And center field was Gary Maddox, who covered the whole planet. And in 2008, you had a Chooch. Carlos Ruiz was the catcher. Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley were your Keystone combination. And in center field was the flying Hawaiian himself, Shane Victorino. And That's what worries about the Phillies. I'm worried about the Phillies. They're not really strong at the mid. You got JT Realmuto's catcher, but he's kind of losing it. Last night he got a big hit, but I don't know. He's wearing down. And then you got Trey Turner. He's okay. Bryson Stott, who's been a disappointment. And center field is nobody. I mean, I could be playing center field in a damn wheelchair. Well, anyway. So, it's the 70s. I remember Family Feud very fondly, and I remember a lot of game shows from the 70s. In the 80s, oh my God, in the 80s, I loved the 80s. Yeah, that's my favorite decade. Everything was big. Big hair, big TV shows. But I had a couple specific things in the 80s that I wanted to mention before I leave. Um, Wrestling. I don't know how many of you are into pro wrestling still, but I was into it in the 70s and 80s, even a little in the 60s. Yeah, the 60s brought us Bruno Sammartino. He was the world champ for a long time. And then we had Gorilla Monsoon. And then you had the villains, um, Professor Tanaka, the guy with the karate chop, and the Iron Sheik. Remember the Iron Sheik? These were just a great time for pro wrestling. And we all kind of knew they've come out now and said it's all fake and it's just entertainment. But back in the day, we knew it was fake, but we didn't want to tell ourselves it was fake because it was fun. The interviews, me, Gene Oakland was the interview guy. And he did the interviews with my favorite wrestler back in the 80s. I got to tell you, there was Hulk Hogan. What you going to do when Hulk runs, Hulkamania runs wild on you? And he would tear open the shirt, Um, a lot of great wrestlers. Ricky Steamboat Dragon, Ricky Dragon the Steamboat, whatever. Sergeant Slaughter, and these guys would go back and forth from bad guy to good guy, bad guy to good guy. Just when you thought a guy was good, he would turn on his partner and he would become bad. And I gotta tell you, my favorite wrestler from back in the 80s. Can you guess who it is? Randy Savage, the Macho Man. In fact, I think I do a good Macho Man. Let me do a good Macho Man. Good imitation of Macho. Let me just really show you the Macho Man. Oh yeah. Oh, something like that. I'm not a well man, so I can't. I can't do it. I got a broken bone in my back. I have kidney stones. I have 2 stents in there, and it sounds like my throat is giving up. I'm not well, but the trooper that I am, I attempted to do a legitimate Randy Macho Man Savage imitation. I loved Randy Macho. He was off the wall. He was a nut, and as we found out, well, he truly was crazy, but uh, he was just a lot of fun, unpredictable. He'd be flying around the wrestling ring, and I loved his interviews. Go to Google. Uh, Google Randy Macho Man Savage. Watch some of his interviews with me, Gene, and you will get a kick out of that. He had this lady called Miss Elizabeth, who was supposed to be his manager. In real life, they were married. And there was always like this one wrestler who tried to steal Miss Elizabeth away from the Macho Man, and the Macho Man would need to fight for her honor. Yeah, that kind of crazy stuff. But it was just a lot of fun, you know. WrestleMania. I remember you guys out there who wrestling fans. I was there. I wasn't there, but I remember WrestleMania 1 and how big of an event it was. And then they had everything, I guess they still do on pay per view. And It was just the Royal Rumble where you got like 30 wrestlers in the ring together and they'd be bashing it out. The last one standing wins. It was just crazy times, crazy times. I tell you, before I leave, one more thing in the 80s. This guy is probably just as popular now. I wanted to get tickets to see this guy. He's coming to the Man Music Center next month and completely sold out. This guy, this show went on sale before Christmas last year. Completely sold out. Can't get a ticket. But I'd love to go see Weird Al. Weird Al Yankovic. Weird Al, he does all these parodies of songs, instead of another one bites the dust, another one gets on the bus. Instead of Lola, lo 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 Lola, lo 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 Lola. Weird Al's parody is Yoda, yo 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 Yoda, yo 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 Yoda, and he makes it into a Star Wars story. Well, I'll tell you what. I've heard that Weird Al should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I thought about this. And I thought, well, should Weird Al Yankovic be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And I said to myself, Greg, that's my name, that's what I call it. Greg, do you think Weird Al should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? No, sip water. And I said that to myself. Well, yes, I think that he should. Now, I know all you pure rock and rollers out there are going to say, Greg, you're full of shit. And you might say that anyway. But the more I thought about it, first of all, Weird Al Yankovic is a brilliant, brilliant guy. I mean, seriously, other than music, he is his IQ is off the charts. He is just a brilliant individual. But you know how much work it takes to get a song that's popular on the radio and rearrange the words to make it funny. Every single one is funny, and yet stay true to that song. Like Madonna's like a virgin, and he made it into like a surgeon, cutting my way. Anyway, very interesting. I read a lot about this guy, and he doesn't have to get permission from the songwriters to I would say mock or even mimic, cover their songs. But he tries to get it anyway because he said it just makes life a lot easier, And some artists get it. They go with the flow. They get the jump. Actually, it's more PR for them and for the song looking, right? Like Michael Jackson. Weird Al went to Michael Jackson when he recorded Beat It. Weird Al's version was Eat It. Don't you make me repeat it. Have a banana, have a whole bunch. Like it, you never nudged out. Eat it, eat it, eat it, eat it, eat it. Anyway, whenever I need to cheer up, when I'm down in the dumps, maybe you could challenge. Put on a little Weird Al. He's sure to bring a smile to your face. All right, so like I said, a lot of people say he's a hack, he has no talent. Why should he even be considered to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, hear me out. Aren't there people in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame right now who should not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Nothing against Aretha Franklin, nothing against her, or someone like I'm trying to think some other lightweight acts. Not that Aretha Franklin is a lightweight. She's absolutely one of the best singers of all time. What I'm saying is she's not rock and roll. Dolly Parton, that's who I'm trying to think of. Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton is a nice lady and she sings great country music and she's a hell of a songwriter too. But she doesn't belong in a rock and roll hall of fame. When you start putting people in the rock and roll hall of fame who don't belong there, it just dilutes it, you know? And that's the mistake that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has made over the years. They didn't just keep it as rock and roll. You know, I mean, even Dolly Parton herself was kind of embarrassed. She at first she didn't want to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because she said, "I'm not rock and roll." But then she thought about it and said, "Okay, what the hell?" So she's it. So that's what I'm saying. If you could put a Dolly Parton in there, who doesn't really belong there, why not put Weird Al? I think he's brilliant. The way he arranges all the lyrics. He has his own band, and they have to learn how to play all these songs, and a lot of them are note for note perfect to the original song. In fact, I'm going to tell you, Greg Kidd, you know the Greg Kidd of the 80s, the Greg Kidd band, and he, that song, da 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 da, baby. Ooh. Weird Al changed it to I Lost on Jeopardy, baby. Ooh. Well, anyway, my point is when Weird Al asked permission for Greg Kidd to use his song, Greg Kidd not only gave Weird Al the go ahead, the green light, he went to the studio with Weird Al and helped to produce the song because he said, sure, why not? And he helped, he told Weird Al how to arrange it and everything. Now that Weird Al said, yeah, there were some people who didn't like the fact that I wanted to think about it. It's kind of an honor, right? Wow, Weird Al, this icon, wants to do your song. Some people didn't like it though. Some people did not give their permission. In which case, like I said, Weird Al could still do the song, but he said, nope. Kurt Cobain, I think, was one. Originally did not want Weird Al to do one of his songs. Then he changed his mind. But Weird Al respected him and said, hey, okay, Kurt Cobain doesn't want me to do a song. I'm not going to do a song, right? So all I'm saying is that Weird Al, the 80s, that was his heyday. He did a lot of his best work, his best send-ups, if you want to call them, were in the 80s. So if you need to smile someday, just ask your robot to play you some Weird Al Yankovic, and it's going to make you happy. So, final thing, I was reading something. It was going around that Weird Al possibly being inducted to the TD Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He has not even been nominated yet. And I was reading this article, a bunch of DJs were talking together, record guys, and they were saying, yeah, we can't, Weird Al, we're not even going to nominate the guy. Me, you know what I say to that? Bull crap. At least give him a nomination, right? Maybe he will never get into the Hall of Fame, but at least nominate the man. That's all I can say. All right, so that's part of the 80s that I love too. So I talked a little bit about remember when, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Yeah, there are all kinds of topics we could touch on. You and me can talk about, right? If you have anything specific from the 60s, 70s, and 80s that you would like me to talk about with you and give you my recollections on that, do this segment so we could, us geezers who have lived through that time, we can reminisce a bit. That, and for the new kids out there who were unlucky to live through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, maybe talking about some of this stuff will spark no interest. Like I said, people who are 18, 20 years old now, look up Weird Al Yankovic. See what it's all about, right? That's all I'm saying. So if you have anything that you want me to touch on in future episodes, just drop me a comment. So, yeah, I'll be glad to. We'll talk about it again. Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I won't be on tomorrow. Tomorrow I am going to my first Phillies game of the year. Now, I was supposed to go to one in May, had to cancel out because I had to sell my tickets because of the little freaking kidney stones. The freaking kidney stones, which are still bothering me. So I'm going to see the Phils and the Cubbies tomorrow afternoon. And let's hope the Phils bring back a win, huh? And they won last night. If they win tonight, I will go right to my seat tomorrow. Won't make a seat. If the Phillies lose tonight, I may have to go down to the clubhouse and talk to the boys, straighten them out a little bit, maybe kick some ass while I'm down there, and say, look, what the hell, right? Play some ball, play some good ball. I'm here today, and I've got about 8-9 more games to go through the summertime. I might as well live at Citizens Bank Park. And let's get it together, boys. Come on. I need a World Series winner before I croak. Listen to my voice. It sounds like I'm croaking already. All right. So if Phillies, if you don't want me to come down there tomorrow and kick ass, you better play well tonight. All right, everybody. I'll see you soon. Whenever I see you. Maybe later in the week. Who knows? Everybody take care. I hope you sound better than I do. What the hell is this all about? All right, everybody. Peace and love. See you soon. Take it. Go Phils.